Let's get into the conversation then. The ANC will tomorrow be picketing outside the Israeli embassy. This will be in support of the people of Palestine. It's been almost 2 weeks since the conflict between Israel and Hamas erupted. Hundreds of people have been killed on both sides of this conflict. Joining us now is ANC Spokesperson Hlengiwe Motsiri-Bhengu. Good morning to you, ma'am, and thank you very much.
Good morning, Xoli, and thank you for having us.
Thanks indeed for joining us in studio. Let me begin with news which came in overnight, and this is the development at the United Nations Security Council. That particular body ruling or resolving to veto a resolution that was meant to put a pause on the hostilities to allow for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. Does the ANC have a view, particularly on the stance that has been taken here by the United States to veto that resolution?
Our position has always been clear on this matter, and I think just the last segment before I joined points to a serious humanitarian crisis that is unfolding before our eyes. We have called for government, South African government, to use every available means to push for an urgent humanitarian intervention in as far as this is concerned, utilizing our seat in the Human Rights Council, utilizing, of course, our role in the United Nations, but also utilizing our relationships with various allied governments across the world. So this is quite concerning and speaks a lot to the fact that not everybody seems to have a full appreciation of the extent of the humanitarian crisis that we are currently facing in that part of the world. And these are some of the things that we're going to be ventilating tomorrow, Xoli, at our picket. But it's not just the picketing. In fact, it's not a picket. It's a march. It's a protest action. And we're going to be ventilating this further beyond just protesting. We're going to be doing quite a lot of work, working together with civil society organizations, faith-based communities in South Africa, led by the Muslim community, to really take this battle to where it needs to be taken.
Yeah. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the ANC, and by extension, its government, decided that you were going to take a non-aligned stance. In this particular conflict, you have chosen the side of Palestine, as expressed by your Secretary General yesterday. Why the difference in approach?
It's very simple. Israel is an apartheid state. Why is it an apartheid state? It's because a state that has decided to colonize a people that should actually be having their own self-determination. So we draw the parallels between what we went through as a country under apartheid, where millions of South Africans did not have a right to vote, could not self-determine. It's as simple as that. And it's a historic position of the ANC. It is good that the entire world, including those that actually stood on the margins of this conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, today the world, the global north, is up in arms calling for the liberation of Palestinians.
Well, if that's the position, that Israel is an apartheid state, why would South Africa even have an office in Israel then, which, by the way, was only downgraded recently through a vote in Parliament, reducing the embassy into a liaison office, if really you were genuine about your stance towards Israel being an apartheid state?
Well, I mean, our government speaks to everyone, like any other government. I mean, we are the ANC, but our government has a position, including an official position on the Palestinians' need for self-determination, and have further called for a two-state solution. That's a position of the ANC, it's a position of the South African government. But that does not mean that the South African government must go to war with every other state that it has disagreement with in terms of whether it's their human rights, records, and so on. It's in the nature of diplomacy, and it's in the nature of working together and to win more people to your ideals. And you do that through using the relevant and the various diplomatic channels. We see nothing amiss with that. Even the downgrading of the status of our mission there is an indication, long before this war escalated in the way that it has escalated, Xoli, is an indication of our disquiet about lack of action on the part of Israel to allow Palestinians to live freely in a state of their own and not stateless in the way that it is at the moment. So that is really just has been our position, and I think it's highly well documented. We've been consistent on this forever on various international platforms, and this work continues now. And we are happy that for the first time in history, humanity is rising on the side of the dispossessed Palestinians.
Is the ANC government still comfortable trading with Israel?
Well, I think I would really be jumping the gun there, because that is a position of government. Government must then articulate that with using the normal channels of government. But as far as concerned, as the African National Congress, we're going to be mounting a campaign. That may very well be one of the matters of discussion for that matter into the future, you know.
I want to then move from this topic, but I can't do that without asking the question about who exactly do you have a relationship with between Hamas, the militant group that was responsible for what we saw on October 7 against Israel, versus the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
Who
do you have a relationship with?
Our historic ally has always been the PLO. And the PLO, like any other liberation movement in various parts of the world, unfolds as it unfolds. But that's our historic liberation. I mean, you would recall that various historic visuals and images portraying Nelson Mandela and Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
And we remain dutiful to that history of our forebears, because there's something that joined them together, and it was that ideal of fighting dispossession and fighting coloniality. And we don't have any formal relationship with the Hamas as the African National Congress. We've always been clear about it.
So, based on exactly that then, why would your deployee in government, Minister Naledi Pandor, see it as okay to call up the Hamas leader as opposed to the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas?
I'm not certain that he hasn't spoken to the President Abbas, that she hasn't done so. But I do want to also say that the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation has a duty to speak to all interest groups in Palestine. She's well within her rights. There is absolutely nothing amiss about that. I see that has been hyped as creating a particular narrative. But from where we're sitting at Luthuli House, we don't see anything remiss with that. There is no decision not to ever speak to Hamas. But I was just clarifying the fact that we don't have a formal, structured cooperation relationship with Hamas. I was also asked about the letter.
I cannot, Ms. Bhengu Motsiri, let you go off that easily on this one.
Okay.
Because there is no formal relationship starting at party political level between yourselves as the ANC and Hamas.
Yes.
But this, at state level, a government minister decides to take up a phone and call a leader of an organization that you say you have no relationship with, and this is a grouping, well, at least that's been branded by the United States and your biggest trading partners, Europe, as a terrorist organization. How is that How is that normal?
Firstly, we don't actually react to characterizations that are made by any other power in the global north. We make a decision on the basis of what our policy says. I do want to restate, Xoli, that the African National Congress does not have a relationship with Hamas. It's as simple as that. The second part about Minister Pandor, I'm sure she is more than happy to speak on these issues, and she's quite, has actually been exemplary in articulating the positions of South Africa and the positions of the African National Congress. I really do not see anything remiss. Just because the U.S. says what it says about the Hamas doesn't mean that she can't reach out to all the various parties and interest groups in Palestine.
Let's leave the Western powers. Let's talk about the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, who are saying that if she's not removed from office, she's got to be fired. Otherwise, she has put the South African government in a compromised position. Your reaction to that?
Well, as part of a package of interventions we're going to be rolling out as the African National Congress, just apart from the protest march, is reaching out to the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, asking for a very frank and thorough and honest and collegial engagement with them. And I know that there's communication that has gone out in this respect. So we're looking forward to that engagement. But we're not going to be recalling Minister Pandor anytime soon. Absolutely not. That is not an option.
All right. And on exactly that point, that's where we're going to pause. When we return, we discuss matters that have to do with issues back here at home. You're watching Newsfeed AM. If you're just joining us, welcome. And you find us in the middle of a conversation with ANC Spokesperson Hlengiwe Motsiri. She is talking to us about some of the resolutions taken by the party's National Executive Committee meeting, which took place over the weekend, an extended meeting. And that particular gathering was. Ms. Bhengu Motsiri, let's then continue with what is topical, at least this hour, or should we say today, and that is that Parliament today is going to decide on whether or not Gcaleka will be South Africa's next public protector. And there is going to be a debate and then a vote. What is the line of march expected of ANC MPs?
Well, as far as I understand, that Parliamentary caucus is seized with this and will be voting in terms of what, in the view of the Portfolio Committee and our caucus representatives, is the ideal candidate. And as I understand it, that is a straightforward matter. They will be voting for the appointment of Advocate Gcaleka, and that is our position. It's very straightforward. We went through a thorough process via the work of Parliament to interrogate potential candidates, and others were found to be less suitable, and there is a view there. And I think you've seen the perspectives of various parties on this matter, but we will be voting, and we'll be voting in a united fashion.
Do you expect?
We expect that we will vote in a united fashion in line with that.
Do you expect dissenting voices during that vote? Do you expect people who will abstain? Do you expect those that will choose to absent themselves, for example?
I cannot possibly speculate that kind of thing, but should it happen, that will be subjected to ANC's internal processes.
So people will be disciplined?
Well, we do discipline people who go against the party line. We have a policy called democratic centralism, and that we hold dear to that, because that is what has kept the ANC coherent and united over the 111 years fully.
Yeah.
And it's an important principle for us as an organization.
Let's talk about governance matters. The Secretary General of the ANC comes out yesterday and says underperforming ministers will not be changed ahead of the 2024 vote. Why that position?
He doesn't say that. That's really, I think, a narrative contestation thing that we need to deal with. Firstly, there's not been a decision of the African National Congress that Pravin Gordhan is an underperforming minister. You have to subject that to a particular test. What is that test? We have a leadership and accountability framework that was introduced since December at the 55th National Conference. We're piloting this. So every public deployee is going to be subjected to that kind of test that gives you a set of indicators for why you come to a conclusion that somebody is an underperforming minister. Yes, there are many issues of concern around, for example, the management of SOEs, particularly those that are under the aegis of the Department of Public Enterprises. I must also just hasten to add, Xoli, that in the next 2 weeks, there is a dedicated discussion that is going to be held by the National Executive Committee of the ANC on the state of state-owned enterprises. Some really tough decisions are going to be made by the governing party in as far as that is concerned. So it's too early to even come to a conclusion that based on what the SG said, that there will be no action on anyone that is not moving with the speed that we require and with the discipline of execution that we require as the governing party, as the center at Luthuli House. So that is what I wanted to say, just to place in context the comments of the SG yesterday.
So you've gone ahead, and I'm happy you did that. You've gone ahead and mentioned a name. I simply asked about ministers who are underperforming, but you've gone with Pravin Gordhan.
But that is where you were going anyway.
Well, that's your assumption. Now that you've gone there.
Yes.
What was his explanation to the NEC about the leadership crisis at Eskom, the leadership crisis at Transnet? And was his explanation acceptable to that meeting?
I will say that he made a presentation, a very detailed presentation about measures that are being put in place to stabilize Transnet, if I may just start with Transnet. We're comfortable with the work that's being done as far as Transnet is concerned in terms of stabilizing the board and addressing, governance dilemmas that seemed to exist there. Say for the resignation of Popo Molefe, apart from that, the board is still there, still working. Secondly, Eskom. On matters of Eskom, of course, that is why we've literally decided that based on his presentation and some level of interrogation by the National Executive Committee of his presentation, there was a decision that this actually needs a longer session. We were dealing with the National Executive Committee, only that was dealing with close to 25 items on the agenda for a period of 3 days. And we wanted to give this a special focus. That is what we're going to be doing, which is why we're actually convening another NEC meeting so soon to come to some conclusions around SOEs. So at this point, it's tentative. At this point, the conversation is ongoing, and we're moving with that. But we are absolutely not blind to the fact that something has got to give in as far as the management of SOEs, particularly the ones that you have mentioned.
How will you react to South Africans who are already, by the way, fed up with this situation at Eskom, for example?
I think it's a genuine...
You're saying that there is now going to be a dedicated session that is focused on Eskom. And the people of South Africa are going to say, but how could Eskom not be the front and center given its stranglehold on the performance or non-performance of this economy? The ANC is disrespecting the people of South Africa because it's the very reason we have a Minister of Electricity whose special purpose is Eskom. How is that not prioritized?
No, it's absolutely prioritized. Absolutely prioritized. And one thing I can say, and you'll read this in our statement that is going out, what the SG has said consistently, often misquoted also, is that we want movement, and we want movement as in yesterday. And this is the assurance I'd like to give to the people of South Africa, that the ANC is not sleeping on the job in as far as fixing Eskom. But I must also say that look on the bright side. Look at the work we're doing to roll out and ramp up the National Energy Action Plan. Look at the work we're doing to minimize load shedding. Look at the 3,000 megawatts that have been delivered even before the projected time frame. So the outlook is positive.
Those are fixes, Ms. Bhengu Motsiri. Those are fixes. It's not new power that is being brought onto the system. These are fixes as a result of the plants that are new, most of them, but because of the design defaults, it's just not been working. And so now some work is being done to ramp them up and to get them on board. So there's no new power really coming into the system.
Look at the results, though. What is the impact of these fixes you're referring to? The impact is that we're minimizing load shedding. Fewer South Africans are experiencing the intensity of load shedding, particularly across the country for that matter. And so the fixes themselves are significant. You can't discount that. And so, notwithstanding challenges at Eskom, the work is being done. But I do want to explain that the Eskom is top of the agenda. Top of the agenda in many respects. And I think you're going to be seeing some of our messages and some of our directives to our deployees, including the ones that I've mentioned.
All right. Let me end the conversation on this final question and ask you, whose words were these? The life of South Africans today is better than it was in 1994 or in 2019. Whose words were these? And on what basis did they say this?
It is based on the outcomes of the 2022 Census report. In fact, the report says so. The ANC paraphrased that. From the 2022 Census report, go to it. It gives you a clear set of data that demonstrates strides made in social protection, comprehensive social security for South Africans. It gives you a sense of how many people have got water taps in their yards that never dreamt of that kind of possibility before 1994. It gives you a sense of how many people have had access to electricity, notwithstanding challenges related to load shedding. I could go on and on and on. We did our own manifesto review exercise, as you know, which is still ongoing. We put out our own manifesto booklet based on internal research that we have done using our own research. And when the census data came out, it even suggested that we actually underreported on our achievements. 2019 is a mixed bag. COVID was there. And I know that we can be accused of blaming COVID for some of areas of underachievement. But it is a reality worldwide. But have a look at the 2022 census report against what the ANC messages say.
Well, I can only say that I suppose the true test of that is going to be whether or not people vote to affirm that statement come elections
in
next year.
2024.
We are going to
We're working very hard.
More discussions like this in the lead up to that, but for the time being, that's where we're going to leave the conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
Xoli
Bhengu Motsiri is the spokesperson of the African National Congress.